Yashwant Deshmukh is the founder director of CVoter. He's joining us along with Head of Research and Strategist at Emkay Global Financial, Mr. Seshadri Sen joining us. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for making the time. Mr. Sen, let me ask you first. Bernstein, I was looking at their report and they believe that if BJP gets anywhere between 240 and 260 seats this time, there would be a ground shock. Do you agree that that would be the tipping point for the markets vis-a-vis expectations, or anything lower than 240, they say, would mark the return of populism? In fact, JM Financial says this would be most evident if BJP loses seats in Karnataka. What, in your understanding, would be the kind of election results that would really shake up the markets this time?
Well, we are looking at a binary scenario for the elections. If the BJP wins a majority of its own or comes even close to that, then I think the current economic policy, the continuity of the current economic policy would be maintained. If they are considerably short, then yes, there would be some questions raised. But what would happen then is pure speculation at this stage, because we don't know what the contours of that new government would be formed, who forms a coalition. And I think, it's way getting ahead of ourselves. But yes, the only negative outcome for the markets is that the BJP falls considerably short of the absolute majority. All other outcomes are largely the same. There may be some short-term volatility in the markets around that, but if you do see any correction, you would buy into that.
There is a correction. If there is a mild correction or a bigger correction on the back of some amount of profit booking, for most factors being now having been considered by the markets and put into the current valuations. But from your perspective, Mr. Deshmukh, where and why do you see the maximum swing take place in votes, if at all? Maharashtra, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, these are the three states that JM Financial is pointing out. But if these are the three key swing states, how do you think it's likely to go for the BJP?
First of all, I don't think from any stretch of imagination Tamil Nadu is a swing state. Tamil Nadu has been going one way or the other for quite some time, and I don't see in any of our pre-poll tracker or all the surveys which have been carried out, anyone has pointed out Tamil Nadu as a swing state. Yes, we have pointed out West Bengal and Maharashtra as two major swing states, that is true, followed by Bihar and to some extent even Karnataka. So watch these four states where they are going, but Tamil Nadu is absolutely out of question of being a swing state. Second thing is, I guess that all the permutation and combination and the anxiety that everybody witnessed, that was largely because everybody overanalyzed the drop of turnout in the first phase. And somehow there is no scientific evidence, number one, that a drop of turnout is pro-incumbency or sign of anti-incumbency.
Sure.
Number two, by the end of 6 phase, we know that turnout is back to square one where it used to be. But from the dissection of the turnout, what I can tell you, that the turnout has generally dropped in the states which have been seen or perceived as lopsided contest in all our trackers, in our pre-poll surveys. And we have been expecting that there would be a certain drop of the turnout in those states, because those who are winning by huge margins, some of them are sitting at home thinking that what's the point of going out and vote? And those who are losing by big margins, they are also thinking sometimes like, what's the point of going out? So there was about 4% voters in our trackers who have been consistently saying that they are going out to vote or not vote. Depends a lot whether their person is winning or losing in that way. So,
on that point of, the kind of voter turnout that we've seen in recent times, I just wanted to ask you, is that also the result of a lack of a wave as such, that this election, like several analysts have been pointing out, has not been fought on a particular plank? And that's perhaps the reason why we've seen a lower voter turnout. Would you agree with that?
Is that a question to me?
Yes, sir. Mr. Deshmukh.
No, not at all. I mean, I was the first one to say it's a zero-wave election, but when I said it's a zero-wave election, it was taken out of context. It was taken out of context because I was speaking to my media friends about that, how there was a big tidal wave in 14 and then there was another wave on the top of 14, and it was a 19 wave. And now, the turnout is suggesting it is where it was 19 in terms of the turnout, and there is no further, wave on wave kind of a scenario when you compare to 2019. But the other point which I mentioned was that does not mean that is a wave against the ruling dispensation as well. So when the tides come, they go back in that way. But are you watching that kind of sentiment on the ground? And as far as I talk to all my journalist friends, go through all the reports, uh, there could be some issues here and there
Sure.
and like that.
Yes.
But there are no signals of apparently a wave against the BJP. There is no wave for the BJP further on the top of 19. But
which is why, wouldn't you agree that this election is a difficult one to call, like several analysts have been pointing out too. But let me take across the question of opportunities in the markets as well, because Mr. Sen actively tracks the markets. JM Financial's report I was looking at, and they're seeing opportunities in defense and capital goods if the BJP retains majority. For you, which are the sectors that you would favor in that kind of scenario? A lot is being said about the potential in manufacturing as a sector as well.
Yeah, so we've consistently maintained for close to a year that this is a cycle, and this is a long-term cycle, so it doesn't get decided in the space of a week. This is a cycle of manufacturing over services and infrastructure and capital goods over consumption. So our favored sectors actually reflect that view, and we like sectors like capital goods, consumer durables, which are a lot of it, say autos and auto ancillaries included in that, industrials. That's where our focus has been in terms of sectors, and we continue to maintain that. A word of caution, however, and that also applies to the broader markets, is that many of these sectors are now, the valuations are challenging if you go on an individual stock basis. So it's not that it's a rising tide that will lift all the boats from here on. One has to be mindful of valuations in these sectors and do selective stock picking, because there are challenges on that front. But if you take a longer term view, we continue to maintain that would be where the markets would focus on, unless there is a sharp change in the policy direction after the election results, which we don't see at the moment.
Another important piece is going to be inflation and indeed how our consumption pans out in the future. Mr. Deshmukh, before I take that question to Mr. Sen, what about the all-important women vote? That constituency is very sensitive to inflation. How do you think that constituency is going to affect the BJP's numbers this time? Because at least one report by IIFL believes that the women voters will structurally benefit the BJP.
Structurally benefited BJP largely because of Prime Minister Modi's popularity among the female voters, and also because of the delivery of governance. We female voters particularly, I have maintained, are very rational voters. They do not vote on the superficial issues of religion and the caste lines. Largely, they have been coming out and voting on what exactly has been delivered on the ground to them in terms of different schemes, in terms of law and order, and so on and so forth. So, and also to add to the fact that in the last 10 years, not only the gender gap in the registration has been diminished, but also the gender gap in the turnout has been, it's no more there. In fact, it is a double whammy. Number one, they have covered up the registration gap. Now they have almost at par with the male. In many states, there is a turnout is better than the males.
Right.
So obviously, these issues, which in terms of delivery of governance, they matter a lot, and that has been benefiting Prime Minister Modi to a large extent so far.
Right.
It remains to be seen whether that constituency remains with him in this election. But by and large, all our pre-poll trackers and all our surveys early before the election started maintain that he has an advantage among the female voters.
Even when you consider the big question of inflation, Mr. Sen, if the BJP wins more than 290 seats this time, perhaps the NDA wins more than 340, tell us and walk us through what kind of resultant impact you're expecting on inflation and consumption going ahead.
But there are two separate questions.
Yes.
Let's take inflation. And this government has been ultra conservative in its approach to inflation. If you remember, they were the one who codified the inflation targeting, regime of the RBI. After a long time, the government and the RBI have been in sync in terms of how to adapt monetary policy and to deal with high inflation. So I think the war on inflation will continue, and I don't think you will see runaway inflation in India if the BJP is re-elected. As far as consumption is concerned, yes, post-COVID, there has been a divergence in consumption where premium part of consumption has done very well, while the mass segments have not done that well. There were signs of green shoots in the mass categories when we saw, for example, entry-level motorcycles starting to do well toward the end of the last calendar year. I think over the next 12 to 18 months, and even sooner, you will see a recovery in mass consumption. It is inevitable. Once the post-COVID effects start to come down as far as incomes and inflation is concerned on the lower income categories. So yes, I think, in summary, I think inflation will remain within control, and the RBI and the monetary policy will remain tight till it does. And as far as consumption is concerned, it may be, the bottom of the cycle as far as mass category consumption is concerned.
Mr. Deshmukh, many of those reports that we are gleaning, yes, talking about the Indian economic growth story as unstoppable. No matter what dispensation really comes in, it is going to be an unstoppable story where we stand today. This election, by far, the political rhetoric has been not about development as much as it has been a poll plank for the BJP in the past. How do you read into it politically?
No, it's not like that. Development is not the poll plank. The thing is that when you talk about the issues of development, I remember the lines that the line between luxury and necessity is very, very, very thin, So many at times we forget that whatever has been done in the name of development, people appreciate it, but after some time they take it for granted. In that way, that minimum possible things that they need is electricity. First of all, they need electricity, then they need electricity 12 hours a day, then 18 hours a day, then 24 hours a day and non-stop, and so on and so forth. So it's the case of roads. So is the case of potable water. So is the case of roof on their head. So every time something that is done better in the name of development for that generation, the previous generation, that is taken for granted. So obviously, many things which have happened in the name of development, people appreciate, but many a time they don't say it upfront big time that, okay, this is a big thing to happen, because now they consider it, this is supposed to have happened. This is ought to have happened. This is the government should have done. So from that way, it might not be, seen as, for example, in all our trackers, all across India, one single most visible development success story are the roads of India. Everywhere you go, not only people mention that, they mention how their life has changed because of that road connectivity.
Yes.
And also, to my surprise, Mr. Gadkari's name is actually very much evident. People remember his name.
Yes, the road story definitely is something that the electorate has spoken about at length. But if you look at the larger infrastructure scenario, Mr. Sen, when you look at the way their entire sector has been moving in recent times, the fear is, on the flip side, from what Mr. Deshmukh is pointing out as well, that infrastructure will take a backseat and it will mark the return of populism if the BJP hits any lower than 240. Is that a fear that the markets also has?
The markets are fearful of the BJP missing majority by a while. What exactly will happen is, as I said, pure speculation. There have been many times in the last 8, 9, 10 years that the markets have been fearful that the government will pivot away from the infrastructure and capex push back to a consumption push, and every time they have been proven wrong. So I won't really stick my neck out and say that at this stage that's a legitimate fear. As I said at the beginning, I have two scenarios. One in which the BJP comes close to a majority or actually wins the majority, in which case we have there is almost we have high predictability on what the next 5 years of the economy looks like. If it doesn't, there is unpredictability. The markets will react by derating the market, but as I said, unpredictability. If it's, I think, a little too early to try and figure out what exactly the new government will do until we see the contours of that government.
Indeed, but Mr. Sen, when we talk about policy continuity, we're also considering what the next budget, the real budget by the next dispensation is going to be like. And a lot is being said about fiscal discipline and indeed managing the fisc on a larger level. We've also seen the RBI write out this massive check to the government with that kind of dividend payout as well. There are lots of expectations from the next budget. How do you think that's playing out in market sentiment right now? What the next budget could deliver?
That's a very good question. And I do believe that the next material trigger for the market will be the budget, not the election results. There'll be volatility in the around the election results, but the material trigger for the market will be the budget. Here's what we expect from the budget. One is that the fiscal consolidation path, as the government has laid out in black and white, will continue. There'll be no deviation from that, especially now that we've opened up our bond markets to the JP Morgan index. The option of being fiscally, of slipping on fiscal targets is quite limited, actually. The second is, despite that, I think tax buoyancy will continue, I think, through next year. And therefore, the government's wiggle room and headroom in continuing to spend on infrastructure on the one hand and still manage the fiscal consolidation is possible. So how they do it, we will see. Wait for those details in the budget. The other thing that one will look at is a budget whether there are new innovative ways of funding. You've rightly pointed out that the RBI dividend is a windfall that will help in achieving that budget target.
Yes.
The other options are asset monetization, faster disinvestment. Those are the other things that one will have to look for in the budget when it's announced in the first half of July. But that is when the next material trigger for the market is. I think the election, there'll be volatility, but it's not going to decide the market direction in any material manner.
Fair point, Mr. Sen. Mr. Deshmukh, in passing, I just want to ask you what you think is going through the Prime Minister's mind right now. Would you hazard a guess? Last election, we saw him go to Kedarnath. He meditated in a cave. This time, I understand he's headed to the south, to the Vivekanand Memorial Rock in Tamil Nadu, at the southern tip of India. What's the political symbolism that you associate with this decision now?
Well, I think he is targeting the south in a big way now, that he understands that so far his saturation performance in the north and the east or north and the west has been able to carry him forward. This time he is looking very aggressively towards the east for that consolidation. And he knows that, for his party, his organization and everything, the next 10 years, when the saturations will start diluting down in the states where they have been commanding so far, they need to grow. They need to grow in the south. So I think the symbolism of Kanyakumari is not lost. That is the area south of Vindhyas where BJP has big plans to consolidate and move on. And this election, by the way, would be the first step in that direction, because we will keep a keen eye on how BJP's numbers in terms of vote share, not in terms of seat share, but in terms of vote share, what kind of threshold that crosses in states like Tamil Nadu, in states like Kerala, where they have been a big zero on their own, but they are very aggressively trying to take that political center stage now. And they have a plan for 10 years probably in place. And they are picking up the right faces to bet on. So I think he is a very, very meticulous planner, extremely meticulous planner. And he thinks well ahead in terms of his own party's growth and our nation's growth. And that's where he's aiming.
Well, several moving pieces in the outcome of the general elections of 2024. And we've discussed what the brokerages are projecting by way of scenarios and the possible outcomes, how that's going to impact infrastructure and capex and consumption and manufacturing and inflation. fiscal discipline as well, and market implications, all of which are in play. And we'll be watching the outcome very closely. Thank you indeed, Mr. Sen and Mr. Deshmukh, for joining us with your perspective on the subject on India Tonight.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.